Hi, everybody. Al Bernstein here with another one of our boxing hangouts. I'm so glad you could join us for one that I'm really looking forward to, because this is one where we're going to answer a lot of your questions. Not only are we going to answer some of the questions that you've already emailed to us, but if you get on now and you want to ask some more questions, you can do that. And we also have a couple of folks who are joining us via the video who got it set up. And we want more of you to do that in the future, who will be actually here to ask questions on their own. So this is a fun format. We're really looking forward to it. The man that sets everything up, of course, the man who is the Hangout producer, and my good friend Dan Parks. Dan, this should be a fun session of the Hangout.
I'm excited for this. You know, this is the first in a big series. This was part of the master plan when we put this whole thing together.
We had a master plan? Who knew that?
Well, you know, the idea was to be able to let the boxing fans get in here and be able to ask the questions that are on their mind at any particular time, you know, during the season this year. And I mean, we're just getting ready to get started with some great fights, and at the same time, a lot of people still have a lot of questions about, you know, boxing, where we're going, and you're the man to answer these questions for us.
Well, this is fun. I like this because it lets us interact with the fans and get a kind of a freewheeling discussion. And a little later on in the Hangout, we'll talk a little bit about some of the fights coming up that I have, and also that I'm just, you know, in the world of boxing that I'm not involved with. So we will chat about that a little bit later. But now, what do you say we get to some of the questions that have been sent to us and the people that sent them?
Absolutely. First question that we have tonight comes from J.E. Joseph Jerry from Oregon, and he asks, if there are rules, isn't there rules or regulations as to whom may enter the ring during the fighter introductions and decisions? It seems to me that there are a lot of people allowed in the ring that really have no valid reason for being there. Specifically, he talks about the beer girls.
Yeah, exactly. You know, the interesting thing is, if you look at for those people that, you know, when you're watching the fights at home, the people that are on the apron or around the ring and sometimes are in that pre-fight period or post-fight usually have a blazer on. In Nevada, I think it's red. In different states, it's different colors. They're the ring officials that are supposed to help keep order, make sure people don't get in when they're not supposed to get in. Sometimes more security is needed. We've seen fights where they've literally had, you know, security guards in the middle of the two fighters. It's very rare, but and they're supposed to keep the wrong people from getting in the ring at any given time. What inevitably happens, and why sometimes those scenes are chaotic, is there'll be some family member or somebody else that wants to get in, and they don't have the right credentials, but they're waved in by the corner guy, and then it's almost, and then they will ask, say, the promoter guy will come over, and they'll realize it's the, you know, the cousin or the wife or the whatever, or just a friend of you know, some fighter that just fought, and they don't want to say no, so they say, oh, okay, come on. Well, pretty soon that multiplies, and then you've got, you know, a massive group of people. Not on that topic, but do you all remember after the Paulie Malignaggi Adrian Broner fight, which of course was fraught with you know, bad feelings leading up to it? Yeah. Not only do we have a lot of people in the ring, remember the ring got damaged during the course of the fight, which was bizarre to begin with, and it was like a giant slope. They fought on a slope, right? It was kind of like downhill skiers in the Olympics.
That was crazy.
And on top of everything else, with the people in there, the one thing I kept thinking to myself, because let's be honest, that was a tinderbox waiting to explode. What if there's some altercation in the ring, and with that ring, it looked like people could get hurt, it could be collapsed. So, but those officials are supposed to keep the people from wrong people from getting in.
Excellent. Okay. Next question. Next question comes from. This comes from New York City, actually. Boxer Drills in New York City. He wants to know, what are your views on the pressure that's being put on the USA Boxing to do away with headgear?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, part of that, of course, I guess, has to do with the fact that they're looking for a way to make the sport appealing. And, of course, there was a time, when we look back at video, where they did not fight with headgear in the Olympics. And, in fact, in a lot of amateur boxing, there was no headgear. I mean, I remember fighting, of course, I boxed back in the Stone Age as an amateur. We had to avoid all the dinosaurs, clomping on us, but I didn't wear it. I remember not wearing headgear when you fought. You wore it when you sparred. And then they did that as a safety measure for the boxers. This might not be the perfect analogy, but remember when they put hockey players, they mandated that all hockey players had to wear a helmet, which made sense. And they even had some that during a period of time weren't wearing helmets because they were grandfathered in and didn't want to wear them. I think that was the thinking in amateur boxing. I think part of the reason why they want to do it in the Olympics, as I said, is to kind of, you don't see the athletes, you want to get this feel for who they are. At the end of the day, safety should trump everything. I don't know if it's ever been proven that the helmets actually are a help in terms of the safety. But if they are, I personally have no issue with them keeping the headgear on, if in fact it's going to help them in terms of safety.
Well, it does seem like kind of an awkward time, especially since there was just that big summit where you had Golden Boy and you had Aram and Dana White and everybody all meeting discussing about the effects of concussions, and it seems like it's a funny time to be talking about getting rid of headgear.
Getting less, yeah. And part of the issue with boxing, and this is part of the MMA and boxing discussion, is in boxing, I think the damage it's done mostly to people that box is from the constant sparring, even with headgear, constant getting hit. One of the things about mixed martial arts that's fascinating is that, yes, there's a grave danger because a guy could be laying prone on a mat and can't defend himself, and one more punch could be difficult if the referee doesn't get in. But what the MMA folks point to, and there's some validity in this, is they don't train every day getting hit, so there are fewer concussive blows that they get. So interesting. If they don't have a safety issue, I'm okay with them taking the headgear away. But I think I would lean toward being safer.
Right. I totally agree with you. All right, well, listen, Al, for our next question, we're really happy to, we're actually going to bring somebody live through our video chat.
I love it.
And we have Neil Cropper from Victoria, BC, who is joining us, who has a question for you.
Hi, Neil.
You're muted, Neil. There you go.
Hi, Al. Real pleasure to meet you. I was just wondering, is there a solution out there to fix bad judging? I mean, judges, more judges, some different positions, technology. Like, what do you think?
Okay, Neil, here's one of the things that I'm not saying this is a solution, but there is one thing that I wish they would have. Well, first of all, everyone should be judging with the same criteria, which they don't really. That's not only, if you talk to 5 judges, some will tell you that, well, if you land 5 really hard punches, that's better than landing 12 punches if they don't hurt the guy. Well, I don't know what hurts a person. For me personally, my sense of judging, I know it's not all about the number of punches you landed exactly, but at the end of the day, we have to have something quantitative. Here's what I would like to see. Not the system that they had in the amateurs where you had to punch buttons and 3 out of the 5 judges had to agree within a second. That was very difficult. I think each professional judge should have a giant button sitting in front of them. One on the left, one on the right. One's the fighter in the blue, one's the fighter in the red. It doesn't go to a central, it goes nowhere except to a printer in front of them. And at the end of the round, they press the print button. And it's simply a reminder to them about what they thought was happening in that last round. They're still free to disagree with themselves and say, well, okay, it's 11 to 9 for this guy, but boy, this guy did a lot more work, and I thought maybe I missed a couple body shots. I'm going to go with the guy with 9. But at least it would give them an idea of what they saw, and it would remind them, because one of the most amazing things, and Neil, you weigh in on this, because you see if you haven't seen this in fights, somebody could win the first 2 minutes of a round, and somebody wins the last minute, and all of a sudden they won the round because the judges don't even remember what happened in the first 2 minutes. So, that's an issue. Neil, I think you might be on mute again or something. We're not hearing you, Neil.
I'm not muted by me. I'm muted by you.
Go ahead. What were you saying?
You're on now.
Now you're on.
Oh, okay. There we go. Sorry. I fully agree. They get wrapped up in the action just like we do. And that having something to go back and understand what they just saw could absolutely make a world of difference.
It could help them.
I fully back you there.
It's not going to take away bias. It's not going to take away totally incompetence. It's not going to take away those things, but it would at least be something to remind them. Neil, we appreciate you being with us. Now you're up in Canada. Who's your favorite Canadian fighter up there? You've got a bunch to choose from. The Canadian boxing scene has been very good.
You know, I couldn't answer that.
No, not a favorite.
I just like watching a good fight.
Okay.
And you know, when people go mano a mano like that, that's what it's all about. Of all sports, that's the one I love.
Beautiful.
That's the one I love. Because it's two men, two women out there showing all they got. There's nothing better.
That's fantastic. Well, hey, thank you for taking the time to visit with us on this Hangout. And when we do them again, you're invited every time to come back and ask a question. Thanks
much, Al.
Thank you, Neil.
Thanks for doing these.
Oh, you're more than welcome. We're having a good time doing it. Okay, so that was good. And we want to demonstrate to everybody that this is a fun medium, and we want you all to join us doing this. So, Dan, we got some more questions?
Absolutely. Okay, we're gonna slip off the board a little bit here. I've got one from Alex Doe, because you've expressed the fact that you are a bit of an MMA fan as well. He wants to know who's your favorite MMA fighter to start with.
There's so many. There are a bunch of them, and of course, I go back to even some years ago when I was lucky enough to do some shows on Showtime with Show Extreme and those what was it? I forget the name of it. Challenger Elite and Elite XC and all those things. And that was my introduction really to becoming not just a casual MMA fan, but to understanding the sport better, because I got to sit with Pat Miletich and Mauro Ranallo and Stephen Quadros and Frank Shamrock and those guys, and they helped school me on MMA a bit. And I did a crash course to at least be acceptable as a play-by-play guy, and I enjoyed doing that back then. And then now, of course, watching some of the UFC fighters that are terrific. The heavyweights are always fun, so I might go with, though I think Jon Jones is terrific, I might go with Cain Velasquez. He's charismatic. He's an exciting fighter. And he's in the MMA, unfortunately, unlike boxing, the heavyweight division's a bit more exciting than boxing's is right now. The rest of the divisions of boxing are terrific. Heavyweight's not so much. But I'll go with Cain Velasquez.
Well, that's an excellent answer, and it actually leads beautifully into your next question, which is from Ken, who wants to know, after the Klitschkos, who's next?
Oh, man.
And he also asks, is Puliev, am I saying his name right? As good as I've read. Yeah. Is he as good as he's read?
Yeah, he's a good fighter. Here's the best hope that the world has for the Klitschkos, not at least one of the Klitschkos, to not continue to dominate boxing, is Hayden Panettiere, the actress on Nashville, who's a singer and is the girlfriend of Wladimir Klitchko. I've even heard rumors that he's now down in Nashville with her, okay?
Oh, my God.
If, in fact, she can win his heart so decisively that she can talk him out of boxing, that may be the best hope for all heavyweights to get to the World Championship.
Well, Robin Givens was the beginning of the end for Mike Tyson, so, yeah.
Yes, that's true. That's true. So we'll see. Maybe Klitschko will decide to retire quicker. He's already 37 years old, and his brother Vitaly, of course, is retired. At some point, we're not going to have any Klitschko in boxing, probably in the next, let's say, 2 years. And when you think of the heavyweight division and you look at who's out there, I mean, there are a couple of names that jump to the forefront just because of A, their marketability, B, their size, they're larger-than-life characters. One is Tyson Fury, who I know is a wildly polarizing figure. Some people love him, some people despise him. I've done a number of Tyson Fury fights on Channel 5 in the UK where I've broadcast, and the interesting thing to me is that there's two Tyson Furies. There's the Tyson Fury that if you just sit down and you and he and I are sitting here having a cup of coffee, everybody would like that guy. He's funny, he's clever, his humor is almost erudite. Figure that one out.
There you go.
Okay?
Nice.
For Tyson Fury, that's making some statement. He's got all kinds of pop culture references. Fascinating guy. Then there's the Tyson Fury that we see on Twitter and we see sometimes in interviews, who is just a crazy out there kind of guy who throws F-bombs around like like Nichols. So he's a fascinating figure. And let me say, I know that the jury is still out in some people's minds on him. I'm going to say, though, he's a good fighter. I mean, yes, he gets knocked down, but he gets up. And he's big. He throws a lot of punches. He's fun to watch. The other man that comes to mind so much is Deontay Wilder, who is most assuredly unproven because he has really not fought a fighter of substance yet. But he's very big. He's almost as tall as Fury. He's very athletic. He is a powerful puncher. And I think
I would love to see that matchup.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to see them. Now, there's one other gentleman who I'm going to name in the picture because he's going to fight. There's two other men. He's going to fight Chris Arreola for the championship that Vitaly Klitschko left behind. And that's Berman Stavern, who's very good. He's in his mid-30s, but don't go to sleep on Berman Stavern. He's a big heavyweight with a lot of power who has one loss in his career, but he beat Arreola the last time convincingly, and now Arreola will fight him again. This is the in better shape Chris Arreola, which helps because at least he's a better fighter. But Berman Stavern, probably the favorite in that fight. Berman Stavern is the sleeper here because he is not a used-up 35-year-old. And right now, if you put him in the ring against both Wilder or Fury, I would rate Stavern a slight favorite in those fights.
Wow. Because
he's a known quantity. But I think that those three might be the ones that we look to in the near future.
Wow, absolutely. That's excellent. Okay, next question is from Ray. Ray P. He says, has Canelo bit off more than he can chew with Angulo?
Well, it's an interesting style matchup. Of the choices that were available to Canelo, and of course this isn't a championship match coming up on March 8th, which will be on Showtime pay-per-view. See, look how I snuck in that little commercial. Hey, you know what? I have a mortgage payment. I've got to continue to work. And I have a son that would like to go to college. Maybe. Anyway, that fight wasn't a championship fight, so they were free to pick anybody they thought would make an entertaining matchup. Erislandy Lara, beat Angulo in a wild fight, a great fight, one of the fights of the year last year. Then he beat Austin Trout. And so if you ask who deserves to fight, if there's such a thing as deserves, because it's not a championship fight, the big fight with Canelo, you can make a strong case for Erislandy Lara. They clearly wanted an action fight. And Erislandy Lara, who's a fantastic fighter, he's brilliant, you have to make him create an interesting fight. That's just the way it is. Right. He will do it if you make him, and he was in a brilliant fight last time. So I think their thinking was, let's create an exciting fight. In the process of doing that by picking Angulo, of course there's a possibility for that to backfire. Because while you're not facing the slick boxing of Erislandy Lara, you are facing the relentless aggression of Alfredo Angulo, who knocked Lara down twice in the fight they had. Right, yeah. And no one had knocked Lara down. So I think it's a lot to bite off for Canelo, but Angulo's defensive liabilities, unless Virgil Hunter, now in his second or third fight with Angulo, I think it's his third, unless he shored up those defensive liabilities, Canelo is a good counterpuncher and has good hand speed. I think this fight is going to be a war for however long it lasts.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. I think it's going to be a battle and a half. I'm so excited for this. Actually, I think this is going to be actually a more competitive match than Canelo Mayweather was.
Yeah, absolutely. The loss to Mayweather. Many people ask mentally, will Canelo is only 23 years old. Will it affect him? I don't think it will because let's face it, everybody loses to Floyd Mayweather. No one's beat him yet. So, with the possible exception of Jose Luis Castillo, who didn't get a decision in one of those fights, but everyone else you can clearly say lost to Mayweather. So there's no shame in it. And I think that Canelo will not be mentally damaged going into this fight. But, at 23, even then, you still don't want to get a second loss in a row.
No. Totally agree with you. All right, hey Al, let's bring in our second video question of the night. We're going to bring in Alexander Martinez from Sacramento, California. Alexander, are you there?
Yes. How you guys doing tonight?
Awesome.
Good.
Buddy. There he is.
How are you?
I'm all right. Thank you, Al. I had a question. Did you get a chance to catch the fight between Gennady Golovkin and Ousmane Adama? And what did you think about the fight? What did you think of the stoppage? And do you think that there's anybody at 154, 160, or 168 that could, potentially be a threat to Golovkin?
Yeah, I did see the fight, and Golovkin faced, I think, a fighter who did some good boxing in that fight. There were moments where he showed us he's a solid fighter. I mean, there's so many solid fighters out there like him who are not famous, and so especially the American fans might not know about him. But Golovkin, he's like Alexander. I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan, but remember the Borg on Star Trek? They would adapt to all attacks. Well, in Golovkin's case, it's not even so much adapting. It's he's got a great chin, he's got great power. He lets you do what you do for a while, and then at the end of the day, he thinks, well, I'm going to get you, and of course he did. I think Gennady Golovkin is a fighter who, I don't know if anyone at 154 would be able to handle him. Erislandy Lara, as a boxer, would give him some trouble, but since we saw Angulo hurt him and knock him down, I think the power of Golovkin would be too much at 154. At 160, when you look at the middleweight pool out there, obviously we'd like to see him fight the winner of the Cotto Sergio Martinez fight. I would rate him as a favorite against either of those men at this juncture. Martinez because of his physical issues, and Cotto, I think Golovkin's too big and too strong for him. The fight, and you kind of alluded to it indirectly, is what would happen if he went up to 168 and fought Andre Ward, which I think at the end of the day is a fight that would really be interesting to everybody. I think that would be a fascinating fight. Now, Andre Ward is, to me, perhaps, along with Floyd Mayweather and Guillermo Rigondeaux, the most skilled fighter, boxer, technician in boxing today. And I am an unabashed admirer of Andre Ward. I think he's tremendous, and I think he's one of those fighters that does what it takes to win. And here's the other thing about Andre Ward: he can fight, he can box you, he can get on the inside, and he can rough you up. And for all the, I always say this all the time, and I had a whole chapter in my book about Andre Ward in which I pointed this out. Even though he's a lovely guy, he's very spiritual, great family man. You put him inside that ring, he's not afraid to bend a rule now and then. He will do whatever it takes to win, and he's skilled. So he's a tough matchup for Golovkin, but I would love to see it. Alex, is that a fight that you would like to see? Alex, you still there?
He's here.
Maybe you didn't hear me.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh,
Yeah,
good. Would you like to see Golovkin and Ward?
Yeah, that's a dream match. I think that, Andre Ward, he is a fighter from Northern California representing Oakland. Mm-hmm. So, he has my support. He's a gold medalist, Olympian. He's really skilled fighter. I think he's right up there with Mayweather. I think that Andre Ward, he's keeping his options open, and I know that he's been having some issues with his promoter. Yeah. I know that he's looking for a big name fight, and if the fans were so lucky that they would make that fight, it would be everyone would win. The fans would win, and whoever wins that bout, it would open nothing but big doors for them in the future.
I agree, and Golovkin is becoming, a very popular figure, and Andre Ward. While I don't think everyone gets Andre Ward. I know he's not wildly exciting in the ring, but he's a very interesting fighter to watch. He throws a lot of punches. And when like I say, when it comes time to be a rough and tumble guy, he does it. So I think he and Golovkin would make for an entertaining and a marketable fight as well. Alex, I appreciate you joining us on the Hangout, and you're welcome to do so anytime. And you live in a great part of the world up there in Northern California.
Yeah, I have one question for
Oh,
you.
go ahead.
First, before I get to the question, I did get a chance to see the Adama and Golovkin fight, and I thought that, the African Adama, he really came to win that night,
Yeah,
and he wasn't going to lay down. He didn't get knocked down. If anything, I think he won maybe 3 or 4 rounds. He gave Golovkin a really good fight, and for any fans that didn't get to watch the fight, try to find it on the internet, download it. It's a really action-packed fight. It's one that you don't want to miss. And another question I had was, are you familiar with the name Ray Woods? He was the stepfather and the trainer of the, rest in peace, the late Diego Corrales.
Yes.
And you were there when Corrales, he knocked out Robert Garcia for the world title. And, just throwing this out there, Ray Woods, he's still in Sacramento, and rest in peace, the soul of Diego Corrales. He's one of my favorite fighters of all time. But right now he's training my cousin. His name is Xavier Martinez.
Oh, great.
He's an up-and-coming amateur fighter. He just placed bronze. He got the 3rd in the Junior Nationals in the Reno tournament. And just watch out for that name. He'll be up-and-coming from Sacramento, and keep him on your radar, because we're coming to the top.
Ray Woods is an excellent boxing guy, and he did a terrific job with Diego Corrales. He's the man that molded him. He's the one that really created the Diego Corrales that became such a great fighter. So, yeah, and Ray is an example of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of terrific trainers that, for both amateurs and pros, that are out there across the United States and, in fact, across the world, who maybe don't get super famous, but they're the men, they're the heart and soul of boxing. Back when I went back to be inducted in the Connecticut Boxing Hall of Fame, they had on their list several of the different trainers and amateur organizers that had done such a good job in Connecticut. And I said at the time about those men that they're the ones that are really deserving of honors like that, because they're the ones that keep the sport alive in all the gyms. They help kids, they help young fighters, men and women, and they're important. And Ray would be a perfect example of that.
Yeah, I agree with you. What do you think about the fight that's going to happen between Sergio Martinez and Miguel Cotto?
I believe that it's going to be entertaining, because Cotto is going to attack. Martinez still has those good boxing skills, but what we don't know is how will his mobility be after all these injuries. And the second question about that fight is, Miguel Cotto has been stunned or buzzed every weight class he's gone from 140 to 147 to 154. Listen, he's a great champion, Hall of Famer, but we know that he has been stunned and hurt.
He's been in a lot of wars.
And he's been in a lot of wars, correct? Yeah. And we know we can remember Martinez, though he's not always the most the biggest one-punch knockout person, but we've seen him with knockouts. We've seen the one-punch knockout of Williams. We're going to know in the first 3 or 4 rounds, because if Cotto can get through the power of Martinez, if Martinez isn't just physically, doesn't punch too hard for him, then we're going to see a heck of a fight. And I think you have to say Martinez is going to be the favorite in the fight, which he is, but Cotto can make it fun. Hey, Alex, thank you so much. We appreciate your participation, and we'll see you maybe on the next one.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alex. You were great. Appreciate it.
This is fun talking to everybody. And let me tell you, for those of you watching, you got to get involved next time, because it's so easy. Dan Parks, the man who organizes all this, all it takes is for you to email him. He's going to get you all set up. And if you've got a camera and a microphone on your computer, which most people do these days, and I am living testimony to it, Dan, there's a special place in heaven for Dan Parks, because he's the one that actually almost made me conversant with technology and the social media. Wasn't an easy job, Dan.
No, you were great. You're fantastic, Al. And you're a sponge. I mean, you've just taken everything in, and look how great you're doing here. And as we were talking earlier, for those of you that have all the iPhone apps, very possible Al's going to be on
Yes.
the Hang With app pretty soon. We'll let you know when that happens. But Al, I have another question because I know we want to keep everybody on schedule. Our next question here comes from Jody Ankar, and Jody actually has several questions, and all of them are great questions. So let's start with the first one. Is there a boxer out there who can seriously challenge Floyd Mayweather? He says during the last few fights that he has scheduled with Showtime. The quick answer is Manny Pacquiao, but assuming that fight never happens, is there someone else because he doesn't see it?
Yeah, that's the $64,000 question in boxing these days. Floyd Mayweather is, it seems, ageless. He's 37 years old and is boxing superbly. You might see a slight difference in the movement, maybe, but it's so small that it's almost impossible to detect. So he's fighting at a very high level. I think it's going to be very difficult for 147-pounders that we know of in this universe right now to beat him. Right now. The toughest fights for him now would be against 154-pounders. Erislandy Lara, tough matchup for Floyd Mayweather. I'm not saying he beats Floyd Mayweather. I'm just thinking he brings things to the table that would be difficult for him. If Golovkin somehow would come down to 154, I don't know that Floyd Mayweather owes it to anybody to go up that high. He is not a 154-pound fighter. And the only reason he fought Cotto at 154 is he knows Cotto's not really a 154-pound fighter either. So I don't think you can really fault Mayweather too much. He's come very high up in weight from where he started. And to get to 154, I don't know. But those fighters would be difficult. There is one man that I believe is going to be difficult for Floyd a year from now if he continues to develop as he has, and that is Keith Thurman.
Good choice.
I believe Keith Thurman is a really terrific fighter, and he is potentially a great fighter. He's gotten better in every fight. He's upped his level of opposition in every fight. He's answering questions. He fought Diego Chavez from Argentina, who's a very good fighter, good 147-pounder, who I hope we get to see again in America. And early in that fight, Chavez hurt him. Thurman adjusted. He boxed well, but then later in the fight, displayed that power that we know Thurman has and knocked him out. Jesus Soto Caras landed a big overhand. He was fighting great these days. Landed a big overhand right, hurt him early. And unlike on that same card where Adrian Broner did not react well to being hurt in the first round, Thurman did. And he figured out a way to shore up his defense and knocked Soto Caras out. I think that Keith Thurman needs 2 more fights, and then I would love to see him in the ring with Mayweather. And Thurman had a great answer for us when we were talking with him about it at the fighter meeting. And I loved his answer. He said, listen, I'm not telling you that I'm the guy to beat Floyd Mayweather. He said, but I am telling you that I am the guy to make finally an exciting fight with him. He said, I guarantee you that whatever happens, my fight with Floyd Mayweather is going to be much more eventful than anybody else. And at the back of his mind, and then he said, of course, I feel I can win. And I love that answer because it was the right answer for him to say at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I believed him when he was saying it too. You can tell he believes it, and that's a big part of it right there.
I agree.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, Al. Next question from our friend, Mark Ortega.
Fine writer.
Yeah, absolutely. He wants to know, Al, are you able to keep track of all the fights you call, or has there just been too many? Is there a point where you lose that?
And Mark is actually funny because he said, it was interesting he asked that because he sent a tweet about, I forget what the fight was now, but it was a fight that I had done that I didn't remember. It was a fight with Kevin Kelly. Kevin Kelly against Humberto Soto back in 2000. And I did not remember doing that fight. And I was actually quizzing him. Well, where was it and what network do you think it showed on? And the problem is, I've done so many that some of them just kind of fade into your memory bank. And most fights you can remember doing. You have memories of it. But once in a while, there will be fights that you forgot. For instance, I completely spaced on the fact that I did Floyd Mayweather's debut fight on ESPN. And then somebody tweeted to me about it, and they showed the fight, and sure enough, there I am doing it. And it was interesting, and there I am interviewing Floyd Mayweather, in his first professional fight, and it all came flooding back to me, but it's fascinating. Sometimes you can't remember, all the fights. And as I've often said, the 80s were very good to me, so I've, killed a few brain cells and forgot a couple of fights. We all had fun in the 80s.
Hey, Al, just like an off-the-wall question, do you know how many fights you've called? There was a time when and this was a long time ago, for the ESPN's 15th anniversary, so it was a long time ago. It was in 1995, where we started to add up all the fights, and we were in the thousands and thousands. And of course, the ESPN series, which I did for 18 years, we did about 45. I did about 45 weeks a year, as they more than they even are doing now on their weekly series. Mm-hmm. And we had 2.5-hour shows, and then we had 2-hour shows. So you figure an average of 4 fights. 3 to 4 fights, every one of those. Then there's pay-per-view fights, and then there's, other things like the Olympic Festival and then the Olympics. So it's thousands and thousands and thousands. We should try and add this total up, and or at least get to an estimate of it. For a while I had an estimate, but it's a lot. Well, we'll do it when we fix the monument at the International Boxing Hall of Fame.
There you go.
Okay, next question.
That's another thing I won't even mention. We're going to do a couple of hangouts from the Hall of Fame inductions this year. Yes. So everybody be on the lookout for that. That's in the first week in June.
Oh, that's going to be fantastic.
Yeah,
we'll look forward to that too. You're talking about the who's who of everyone right there.
Oh, we're going to have everybody with us.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, let's see. Next question. Well, you just answered one question from Mr. Barron, who asked if Keith Thurman is all that. From Marcus Day 2, he wants to know, will Rigondeaux ever get the props that he deserves?
Yeah, it's interesting. Guillermo Rigondeaux has done everything that's asked of him, and has won titles at an early point in his career. He's only got, 13 professional fights or so. And, when he beat Nonito Donaire was considered one of the 2 or 3 best pound-for-pound fighters in the world today. And not only did he control that fight, but remember, he was dropped in the 10th round, I think, by Donaire. Dropped with a very big punch. Did it affect his composure? No. He went on to win that fight by decision. And he's a very, very good fighter. Now, his style is not one that is wildly crowd-pleasing. I think that's probably an understatement. But I think the right fighter that makes him fight a certain fight that's exciting will bring out that power in him. And remember, he scored a lot of knockouts in his professional career as well. So I think but he's already in his early 30s. If he can make some important fights in the next several fights, maybe Guillermo Rigondeaux will finally get that, the plaudits that he deserves. The tricky part is now, just as Alexander mentioned that Andre Ward was in the midst of issues outside the ring with promoters and legal issues. Rigondeaux, it seems to me, is in an interesting vortex with his promoter Bob Arum and Top Rank and HBO, which televises him. There's a little disconnect between the three of trying to figure out what's the best way to utilize him. And I think that's going to create some issues for him.
God, I hope he doesn't get caught up in one of those, incredible knots that ends up keeping him off the shelf for a long period of time.
And it could happen, and it is especially dangerous for him because he had that long amateur career. He's arguably the most decorated amateur fighter of all time. And so he didn't get an early start as a pro. So the boxing biological clock for him is ticking.
Right. Okay, next question here is, we'll go back to another one of questions from Jody, who wanted to know, do you think that boxing is ever going to get a unified sanctioning body anytime in the near future?
I would love to say yes, but I think the answer to that is I have a chance to be the next pope, more likely than one single unifying body. You know, I just don't think it's going to happen, and it's a shame because that's the big issue with boxing. You know, I have always said that for all of boxing's issues, and it's a totally entrepreneurial sport that doesn't really have a guiding body running it, so that creates all kinds of issues. But the biggest thing is that boxing has so many champions and so many weight divisions. A single unifying body could solve that issue. But the problem is, I don't see how you can get one, and because it's a worldwide sport too. You know, even if you got one in, let's say, you know, our view is decidedly American in many ways. Although God knows I'm a person that enjoys and believes in boxing as an international sport. But you think of, well, in America, could you do it? Well, that wouldn't be the answer because there's a whole big world out there where, you know, many champions reside and that would be affected by this. So I just don't see a unifying body.
Okay. Next question. We'll finish off Jody's question. He says, in his opinion, pay-per-view has really hurt the sport of boxing. It goes on and on, but do you think that we'll ever see boxing for free again on TV? And then he says he thinks MMA is growing because there's more opportunities to watch that than there are boxing.
Well, I would disagree with part of that. And as you know, as you've pointed out, I'm not an anti-MMA person. I'm not an anti-UFC person. But the reality is most of MMA that is done by the UFC is on pay-per-view. Now there's more shows. There are some shows on Fox, and there's shows on Fox Sports 1 plus the national network Fox. It's true, but for the most part, that sport is still driven by mostly pay-per-view fights. Boxing, if you think about it, might have 4 pay-per-view fights a year because Mayweather and Pacquiao are the major pay-per-view draws. Now Canelo, Showtime's taking a shot with Canelo on a pay-per-view on March 8th. But boxing really isn't the pay-per-views that limits boxing's audience. And I have to say, even though I work for Showtime and the premium networks have been great for boxing in many ways, Showtime, and HBO both have 20 to 30 some million. HBO has a little bit more than us, but we're in the 20 to 30 million home area. Not every human being can see a fight on Showtime or HBO. And that's where most of the big fights reside. So it's not the pay-per-view so much that limits boxing. It's that the fights that are open to most people still have a finite number of people that can see it. Now, the problem is boxing got very widely popular in the 70s and 80s when it was on over-the-air TV in the afternoon. It was terrific. Those fights have shifted to premium cable. There is no question that if the great fights, if we saw Broner Maidana on free television, if we saw, Pacquiao or Alvarado Rios or Alvarado Provodnikov or, those kind of fights, if we saw them if we saw even 6 of those a year on one of the over-the-air networks, boxing would blow up. Boxing would be, people who don't know better now would acknowledge, even the media members, that, wow, boxing's really good now, which it happens to be. The problem is not everybody sees those fights, and not everybody gets made aware of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about while you were talking about that, what was going through my mind was, the format and some of the roads that the UFC has taken, in my opinion, are some of the same roads that boxing needs to take. One of the things that UFC just launched was something called a Fight Pass.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. And, really essentially what they're going to do, I can see down the road in the future, they're going to completely bypass the cable networks. Right. And they're going to be, I can see a day in the future where, we're going to completely have everything come to us directly through our iPads or through our iPhones. Do you see that?
It's going to happen at some point. And, part of the thing is, and this is a discussion that's often had, one of the things is that the MMA, specifically the UFC now, which really controls most of MMA. I know there's Bellator and there's some other organizations, and those organizations do have a certain foothold, but since most of the sport is controlled by one organization, it's like Major League Baseball or the NFL or the NBA or the National Hockey League, they can do that. They can take their message and they can deliver it in the way they want to do it. Boxing can't do that because there's different promoters, there's different organizational bodies. In many cases, the networks are driving boxing. So boxing isn't free to always do those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, one last question. We got one from Larry who wants to know who do you like in an Adonis Stevenson, Sergey Kovalev bout?
Oh man. Hey, well, first let me say, I'm loath to criticize these kinds of things, but I'm going to tell you, this fight is starting to feel like the Riddick Bowe Lennox Lewis fight to me. And did that fight ever happen? No, because they waited too long. And it's not the only fight. I'm using that as an example. There have been many others, and probably a lot of the fans could name others. My concern about that fight, and as a boxing fan, I really want to see that fight, like any boxing fans do.
Yeah,
we've watched these men fighting very well. The Stevenson story is a terrific one, late in boxing after troubles in life. Emanuel Stewart's nephew, Javon, John Hill, has helped him so much. Stevenson has become a good all-around fighter, not just a power guy, against Sergey Kovalev, who's this dynamic assassin as a puncher. How could you not want to see that fight?
Yeah.
We have visions of it in front of 18,000 people in the Bell Center in Canada, which is where, even though Kovalev would be going into hostile territory, that's where they could make the most money. Clearly, it might even be a pay-per-view fight, whether, again, there's an example of one that could go there, or hopefully it would be more available. Whatever the case, we have these visions of that. Once again, one more time, they're both fighting somebody else.
Yeah.
Someone's going to get beat.
Exactly.
Someone's going to get cut. Something, if they don't make that fight pretty soon, they run the risk of it not happening. If it happens, which I hope it does, I think it is a fascinating matchup because while Stevenson is a very good puncher, Kovalev is probably a better puncher. While Kovalev is a pretty good technical fighter, Stevenson has better movement and is a more, I think, a better fighter at adjusting to situations.
Mm-hmm.
It is going to be fascinating to see which one of those strengths or deficiencies, if you want to look at it that way, is what does in one fighter or the other. That's another fight where we're going to know about 4 rounds in, I think, because we're going to know which fighter is able to take the other fighter's power a little better. And if they can both handle each other's power to some degree, it's going to be a hellacious fight.
That's going to be a war then.
Yeah, then it'll be a tremendous war, and because both men are good finishers, they're exciting fighters, and I'm just, the light heavyweight division is a division that, in years past has been spectacular, and, in recent years it's been okay, but it hasn't produced the dynamic matchups and names that it used to. Well, a little glitch, but I'm back with you again. It's impossible to get rid of me. And we're going to close out this boxing hangout. It's been such fun getting all your questions and talking to all of you. And we want more of you to join in on camera next time. Let's talk about the next time I'll be joining all of you in the United States, in any case, on Showtime pay-per-view, which will be the Canelo Alvarez versus Alfredo Angulo fight. It will be March 8th. It will be a pay-per-view event coming to you from the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. And let's look at the tail of the tape between these two fighters, and we'll take a look at the fact that Canelo is, of course, the younger fighter. Both men have great knockout power, though Angulo's is percentage-wise even bigger, and we know he's a huge puncher at 154 pounds. And for the most part, the other numbers are similar in the height and reach, but Angulo fights shorter, and he's always trying to come in, so he'll be trying to do that, and Alvarez will be trying to counterpunch him. Now, one of the places you can go is the website you see there, where you can go on the sports.show.com website, and you can get all the information you want about not only the pay-per-view that's going to happen, but also there's great features on the website, and you can find out all about these two fighters and the matchup, and that's a great go-to place for you. Now, we will next be joining you for our next hangout on February 25th, when Paul Galander, who is the author of a book, Sonny Liston, The Real Story Behind the Ali Liston Fights, he's going to be joining us because it's it'll be the 50th anniversary of the Ali Liston fight, and the first one, and so as a result of that, it's going to be a great time to look back. And he not only is going to join us and give us a lot of insight, but he says that he's going to have some important new information that will be interesting to all of the folks that has never been really publicly revealed. It's a fascinating book, and it's got some really bombshell things in it about what went on during that time, and I'm anxious to talk to Paul about it. Dan, I know you really enjoyed the book, and
I'm not excited for this at all.
Look at you.
I'm not excited at all. This is going to be such a great hangout. I have been waiting for this for a while.
It's going to be very interesting because we're going to revisit. And one of the things I want to say to people is, he wrote the book very much. There was one other book that was written that at least attempted to actually tell Sonny Liston's story as an individual story. This is the first book that I think has been written kind of from Sonny Liston's viewpoint, and I think Paul would be the first to say, with a more sympathetic view of Sonny Liston, and one that kind of states his case, if you will, as a great heavyweight champion. So it's going to be fascinating to talk with him about that. That's going to be on February 25th, and we're looking forward to all of you joining us then. Dan, as always, a great job, and this was the first of many of these hangouts that we're going to have where you, the fans, are going to be able to join us.
Fantastic show, Al. Thank you so much again for taking the time to get here with your fans, and for all of you that are out there and watching this right now, make sure to go click on the subscribe button upstairs there, and what that's going to do is when we announce a new hangout, when we do a surprise hangout, when something comes up and Al says we're ready to do a hangout, all of our subscribers are the ones who are going to get the message and the note about that first. So you want to subscribe to the channel so that you'll be notified when something cool comes up.
All right, we will say goodbye to you all now, and thanks very much for joining us. I will actually next be on television, for those of you in the UK, on March 1st on Channel 5. James DeGale, the super middleweight contender, fighting in a match on that network, and I'm thrilled to be going back to the UK. And so if you're in that part of the world, please watch on March 1st, and then, of course, as we mentioned, on March 8th, I'll be back with the pay-per-view of Canelo and Angulo, and right here on the Hangout on February 25th. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.